Hi, it's Katrina. From a set of mysterious rock caves hidden in a German forest to the most astounding and unbelievable city of the ancient world, here are 10 of the most enigmatic secret places you've probably never heard of. Number 10. Portoflavia. The sea harbor at Portoflavia in Italy is unlike any other in the world. Located in Sardinia, at first glance it looks like a small castle carved into the rock, but there is much more here than meets the eye. It is actually considered a masterpiece of engineering, built in 1924 as a mine. This construction allowed workers to drop recently mined ore directly from the mine and onto the cargo ships that waited in the harbor below. This invention took local mining to a whole new level of convenience and efficiency. Mining operations in Sardinia goes back to the early 1600s, but in the 20th century it began reaching peak production. A lot of different ores were in demand at that time, such as zinc and lead, and by modernizing the methods of farming the precious metals, workers were able to extract and ship far more than any other time in history. The issue was efficiency. It was no easy thing to get the lead ore from the mine to the nearest port. It was a huge hassle, expensive, and a giant waste of time. So, to cut down on how much time it took, Portoflavia was built right on the side of the sea cliff. They created an exit right above the water, with a sheer drop going into the ocean below. The mines were connected by tunnels, and instead of carting the ore all the way up the mine down the road to the nearest port, then onto the vessel, they could literally just lower the ore from within the mine directly onto the ship. It was as revolutionary as Amazon sending you a box of cookies using a drone right to your front door. It only took 2 years to build this unique port and reduced production costs by an estimated 70%. What once used to take several weeks or months was shortened to a few days. Over time, mining operations slowed down, the industry gradually died, and the Portoflavia mine closed in the 1990s. It is now being preserved and is on the list to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Number 9. Externstein. In Germany, the Externstein is a unique set of rock formations that are historically and culturally significant. Unlike standing stones that have been moved, it is a natural formation that has been altered by human hands over thousands of years. The stones may have been a sacred site for worship or sacrifice, but their meaning to ancient humans remains a mystery. The stones have been altered and used by many different groups of people, and each group may have used them for entirely different reasons. Paleolithic and Mesolithic stone tools have been found at the site, indicating it may have been some type of sanctuary or even astronomical center like Stonehenge. There were caves carved into the faces of the rock towers with windows that aligned with each summer solstice. There are symbols carved onto the rock indicating it was a center for Saxon pagan rituals. Saxons were known to gather in nature to worship their gods, and the monoliths would have been the perfect place. Later, when the Emperor Charlemagne forced the Saxons to convert to Christianity, he destroyed all pagan temples and ordered their sacred sites to be marked with the Christian cross. A monastery was built at Externstein, founded in the 9th century. During this time, monks carved religious scenes into the rock. Stone railings were built in 1663, long after the old Saxons had vanished. After Charlemagne and the monks, in the era of the Nazis, Himmler had excavations performed here to look for proof of an ancient Germanic civilization, though no proof was ever found. These sacred rocks have seen a lot over the years, but not many people know about them outside of Germany. It is now a place for locals to go walking and hiking. Number 8. Elora Caves. The Elora Caves is an ancient site located in India, listed by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site with ties to Hinduism and Buddhism. The amazing rock temples here were carved right out of a hill, back between the 6th and 8th centuries AD. The builders started from the top of the rock and worked their way downwards, carving intricate details as they went. This would have required enormous skill by talented mathematicians and engineers. The most recent and most impressive, perhaps, is the Kailasa Temple, standing nearly 100 feet high. It's the largest monument in the world cut from rock, and yet not that many people have even heard of it. You will find 35 caves and temples here, and each one was carved by hand. The ancient people took what was a mountain of rock and using chisels and hammers dug into it like a sculptor with a block of ice until they had created all these amazing monuments. One of the earliest caves is a great example of Hindu architecture, complete with an inner sanctum, a walkway for worshippers to move around, vestibules, and plenty of reliefs and carvings decorating the interior, depicting scenes from sacred Hindu texts. At the entrance of the cave, there is also a large dancing Shiva surrounded by musicians and slaying the buffalo demon king. All these statues and reliefs are still in shockingly good condition, considering the site is around 1400 years old. The biggest mystery here is, where did the builders take all that rock that they carved out? Researchers have not found any nearby, and many wonder what they did to seemingly pulverize all that stone to make it disappear. Number 7. Ayutaya. About 40 miles from Bangkok, the current capital of Thailand, there is a place much older called Ayutaya, and it's a historic city founded back in 1350. This was about 100 years after the old capital of Sukhothai was founded in 1238, Sukhothai being the very first Siamese capital in what is today Thailand. Ayutaya became a prosperous city by 1378 and remained the capital for another 400 years, until late in the 1700s. The city was named by King Ramathibodi, who actually based its name not on himself but on a magical kingdom from an old Thai legend, the Ramakien. Ayutthaya remained an important stronghold because of its trading ports, which welcomed international merchants from all over Europe, England, and further east. It was also a preferred stopping point for these traders, who were shocked and fascinated by the impressive temples and palaces and the winding waterways that acted not only as byways through the city, but also as blockades protecting it. Forget walls, Ayutthaya had great moats preventing them from being sieged. But unfortunately, the protection granted to them by their waterways and temple fortresses only lasted so long. The old capital was attacked by the Burmese and burned to the ground. The Burmese killed every last person in sight, and those who managed to survive were taken into slavery. The city fell in the year 1767, and the ruins of what was once a great and prosperous civilization are amazingly still standing today. Number 6. The Alhambra. The Alhambra is a magnificent palace, fortress, and citadel that should be considered one of the wonders of the world. Located in Granada, Spain, this magical place was once the palace of the Moorish monarchs and was the inspiration for many songs and stories. Built in the 8th century, Alhambra means Red Fort in Arabic. It is the only surviving piece of major architecture from the Islamic Golden Age, when the Nasrid dynasty ruled the area as the last Islamic kingdom anywhere in Western Europe. This palace is huge. It's not like the crumbling castles you see in other parts of Europe. It's a whole complex that spans 26 acres and has at least a mile of walls, along with 30 individual towers. The first historical records of the palace date back to the 9th century, to a man who allegedly sought refuge in a small fortress during fighting between the Muslims and the Muladis. The small fort grew into a bigger fort, and by 1238, the Alhambra became the new royal residence of Muhammad bin al-Hamar, the leader of the Nasrid dynasty. When Islamic rule ended in 1492, when they were conquered by King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile, Spain was unified under the Catholic monarchy, and the Islamic rulers were banished. The Alhambra was then altered to better suit the Catholics, which meant the mosques were destroyed and many parts of the great structure were changed, but they were careful to maintain much of the artwork and precious parts of the palace. Number 5. The ancient city of Volubilis. The ancient city of Volubilis stands today as a sad ruin near the holy town of Moulay Idris Zerhoun in Morocco. Despite it being in such rough shape, it is still the best preserved Roman ruin anywhere in the country, and came from a time before Christian rule, when the region was under the local administration of the Kingdom of Mauritania. It was also one of the most remote cities anywhere in the Roman Empire. The city was once home to about 20,000 people, and prospered thanks to olive and olive oil production, which was an enormous demand at the time. The city boasted many temples, grand residences, and stunning works of art. But things came to a dramatic halt in the year 40 AD. The residents revolted against the Roman invasion. The city hung around for a bit longer until the Romans eventually withdrew from the area in 285. Then, when Islam arrived in the region, many of the old structures and temples were destroyed. The residents fled to the local mountains, and the place was widely abandoned. As recently as the 18th century, a horrible earthquake hit the region, and what few buildings remained were shaken and destroyed. Number 4. Persepolis. Persepolis was the capital of the Achaemenid Empire, erected at the foot of the Mountain of Mercy in what is today Iran. According to UNESCO World Heritage, it is one of the greatest archaeological sites in the entire world. It was a gem of the old Persian kingdom, with construction beginning in 518 BC by Darius the Great. He built a wide terrace, and the kings that succeeded him, like his son, the infamous Xerxes I, continued to add things, such as the huge Apadana Palace and the Throne Hall. At its peak, the structure was of mythical proportions, with large halls, countless grand structures, and walls covered in beautiful works of art. Today, it's little more than a large ruin, but over 2,500 years ago, it was a spectacle. It was likely so big that archaeologists can't even say for certain what other permanent structures flanked the main palace. It was likely more of a small city than just a palace and a seat of power. Persepolis was taken by the army of Alexander the Great in the year 330 BC. Shortly after this, the palace was consumed by fire. Alexander the Great saw to it that the entire place was destroyed and could never be used again by the Persians, which was not something Alexander usually did. He wasn't a scorched earth kind of guy. But considering the memory of the Persian king Xerxes burning Athens 150 years prior was still fresh in the minds of the Greeks and Macedonians, historians believe Alexander destroyed Persepolis so effectively as revenge. Number 3. High Bridge. One of the oldest bridges in England crosses the River Witham in the historical old city of Lincoln. It's called High Bridge, and it was constructed in the year 1160. What's truly unique about this historical bridge is that it's one of only 3 still standing in England that has houses on it. It's also the oldest of the 3. It was an ordinary bridge until around 1550, when timber-framed structures were built over it. There was originally a chapel in the medieval era, but it was torn down in 1762. Today there's a cafe, a shop that sells traditional baked goods, and some very small apartments. It's a unique piece of architecture that can't be found anywhere else. The bridge also has a bit of humor. Its arc forms a narrow opening underneath that boaters pass through. It's been dubbed the Glory Hole, and it's the only way to get from the River Witham to the old harbor of Brayford Pool. Number 2. Borobudur. The Temple of Borobudur in Indonesia is an ancient Mahayana Buddhist temple on the island of Java. It was originally built during the Sailendra dynasty that ruled the land between 650 and 1025 AD. It's one of the biggest Buddhist temples anywhere on the planet and was the site of great pilgrimages up until the 15th century, when the temple was abandoned and the local Javanese gave up Buddhism and converted to Islam. The amazing temple was rediscovered by explorers in 1814. Since then, it has come under the scrutiny of archaeological investigations by both the local Javanese and the Dutch. It was designated a UNESCO site in 1991. However, there still isn't much known about the time in which the temple was constructed. There are no records existing today that detail why it was built or who commissioned it in the first place. The only clues archaeologists have to go on are the artistic comparisons made between reliefs and inscriptions found elsewhere in Southeast Asia. It was obviously influenced heavily by the introduction of Indian cultures during the 1st century, when merchants that practiced Hinduism and Buddhism settled in the region and married into the local population. The Javanese and Indians mixed, and this resulted in a unique blend of cultures that persists to this very day. Number 1. The Forbidden City. The Forbidden City is located in the heart of the Chinese capital, Beijing. It's a self-contained city in its own right, walled off from the rest of Beijing by a giant moat that's up to 150 feet wide in some places. It's absolutely enormous and is comprised of over 90 palace compounds and 98 buildings. It's a mysterious vestige of what the old Chinese dynasties that ruled from within the walls once looked like. This was the center of China for over 500 years, both politically and ritually. Construction on the Forbidden City began in 1402 when the Chengzu Emperor changed the capital from Nanjing to Beijing to start his own city. It was completed in 1420 and has since been the home of 24 emperors throughout both the Ming Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty. The last emperor of Imperial China lived inside the Forbidden City, but was expelled in 1925. To this day, the Forbidden City remains the most important cultural heritage site in the People's Republic of China. In comparison, it's the White House of China, only many hundreds of years older, and far less known to the outside world. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing historical places would you like to visit, or have you already? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. See you later. Bye!